I'm Devin. Nice to meet you all. And I'm here to talk to you about Kanye West. Now, how many of you know who Kanye West is? Have you heard his name before? Right. How many of you would consider yourself like big fans of Kanye West? Yeah. This is not surprising to me at all. I consider myself a big fan of Kanye West, and I'm here to talk about why. So, for those of you, anyone who doesn't know him or isn't familiar with his work, Kanye is he's a rapper and a music producer who consistently produces really stellar, innovative, like boundary-pushing work, and also makes a habit of making a complete asshole of himself in public appearances and interviews and at various award shows that some people here might have seen. I know there's plenty of argument to be had on the stellar work side of the equation. It's difficult to come up with an objective set of criteria for whether or not someone's work makes an important creative impact on the culture, right? Like we do our best to have a public dialogue about that. So Kanye's been nominated for 53 Grammy Awards. He's won 21 of them. That means he's more nominated than, he's the fifth most nominated person in Grammy history. I think the only person of color ahead of him is Quincy Jones. His work is held in high esteem by other artists and musicians. The last interview Lou Reed of the Velvet Underground ever gave before he died was a dissection of Kanye's album Yeezus, and he praised it to the sky. He said it's one of the best pieces of music we heard in the last 10 years. Kanye was instrumental in making hip-hop the branding and financial and cultural force it is in the culture right now. He was instrumental in Jay-Z's career, produced a bunch of his biggest hits. So why does he do this to himself? Like, why does he talk this way in public? Why does he say these kinds of things? My phone. I have some quotes. You guys have probably heard some of these before, but I'm going to read some of them anyway. I feel like I'm too busy writing history to read it. I am God's vessel, but my greatest pain in life is that I will never be able to see myself perform live. I am Warhol. I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation. I am Shakespeare in the flesh. Why does he feel the need to say things like this in public and torpedo his own career? Well, Paul Arden, there's this guy named Paul Arden. He was a creative director for Saatchi & Saatchi, one of the biggest advertising firms in the UK. And he wrote this book called, this little sort of visual communication Bible that sits on the shelves at a lot of agencies. It's called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. And the argument that he makes throughout the course of this book is basically that kind of thinking, the kind of thinking Kanye does, albeit very publicly and loudly, is an important kind of thinking to do if you want to make a massive impact on the culture. You can't construct artificial boundaries between yourself and people like Steve Jobs or Walt Disney. You have to be able to see your own work on that level, or on the level of a corporation like Coca-Cola, right? And that's all well and good, but his mode of communication is still so abrasive, right? He's so brash, and it's really frustrating for a lot of people to listen to him talk. Well, this works in his favor in terms of making a cultural impact. It's annoying for people, but in the age of the internet, and this is something that's important to understand if you're going to create culture in the age of the internet, if you make a cultural product, the best possible situation you can be in is have 50% of the people in the culture love it and support it, and 50% of the people hate it. Because what happens is then there are arguments in comment threads, and people write think pieces, and everything gets driven up in Google's algorithms and Facebook's algorithms. So there's this sort of two-tiered thing happening where if you're trying to create culture or to embed a cultural idea deeper into the public consciousness, you're not trying to make a point or end a conversation when you're doing that. You're trying to create a conversation, and you're trying to make that conversation bigger. So what's happening is up here there are all of these arguments going on, but down here Kanye's career just keeps growing and growing. People say all the time why do people keep letting him come to award shows? Why do people keep working with him if he's such a da-da-da-da? That's why, because the size of his cultural conversation keeps growing. So what's the point? What's his goal with all this? Why? Right? Okay, he's getting a lot of people to talk about him. He's creating a really big cultural conversation. But why? Well, if you believe what Kanye says about himself, his goal is to create dopeness. What does that mean? I want to make dope things. I want to create more dopeness. And people sort of like, right, okay, whatever, like they sort of dismiss that because it's so broad and it's so general. And if you listen to enough interviews with him, what he means when he says that is, when you see somebody doing something extraordinary, like you see if you're a programmer and you see somebody coding an incredible piece of software, or you're an engineer and you see someone designing an incredible electronic device, or you see if you're a dancer and you see somebody execute like an incredible move, they're moving across the stage, you get this feeling inside of you, this like, yeah, that's dope, like you get this like rush of energy, right? For anyone not like schooled in hip hop parlance or whatever, dope means awesome or great or like that feeling. And often when people have that feeling, they also have the urge to create themselves. And that's the reason we listen to music and stuff like that. We want to have that feeling. We want to be inspired. So that's what he's trying to do. If you believe him, like I said, he's trying to create more dopeness. And if you look at the course of his career, especially recently, this technique he has. Oh, by the way, when I was talking earlier about him creating conversations and like causing controversy, he knows he's doing this. He knows he's taking advantage of that process. He did this interview for the BBC with Zane Lowe, where at the beginning of the interview he looked at the camera and he said, all you journalists pay attention, you're going to get some great sound bites out of this, you're going to get some clicks out of this. So he knows what's going on. He's very aware of what's happening. And relatively recently, during the recording process for the album Yeezus, he was doing a lot of interviews about how frustrated he was because he really wanted to do a clothing line. He wanted to design clothing. And he worked with Nike, and they only let him design one shoe, right? And he was really frustrated by this. He wanted to do a whole line, and they were imprisoning him and imprisoning his creativity. And people were like, dude, you're already a musician. You already have millions of dollars. Like, why do you need to design a clothing line? Like, who cares? It's fashion. It's frivolous, right? But as a result of this, well, actually, as an aside, when people say that, like, oh, he just wants more money, oh, he just wants more fame, or he just wants more attention, when someone is operating at that level, let's take an example. One of my favorite speakers took an example from basketball. Let's talk about sports for a minute. So you have like Kobe Bryant playing for the Lakers, right? And he sort of stayed in his career and continued playing basketball for a long time. People are sort of like, oh, why is he still playing? Like he just wants more money. Da 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 da. There's no feeling. There's nothing that Kobe Bryant is going to buy with money that is going to equal the feeling of him like driving across a basketball court and like dunking on LeBron James. So like one of the best players in the world. Like no yacht that he's going to buy, no like house that he's going to buy is going to make him feel that way. So when you talk about somebody on Kanye's level doing it just because he wants attention, this level of work, like all the stage setups you can see here and stuff like that, he's directly creatively responsible for a lot of this stuff. He collaborates with artists. Someone does this level of work because they love the feeling of making dopeness, right? And so back to what I was saying earlier. He was throwing a fit in all of these interviews because he wanted to do a fashion line, right? And that was creating one of those sort of conversational explosions I was describing earlier because people were shouting him down and telling him to stop it and telling him But the result of that process is now he has a deal with Adidas. He's releasing an entire clothing line with Adidas. So it's an example of that process. And actually, up here, there's a cultural debate going on, and everybody's sort of sick of him. But down here, on the level of like material product and actual movement of capital, Kanye is like getting what he wants over and over and over again. So my question to you guys is like, you understand that process now. Like, could you do that? Could any of us do that? Could any of us create cultural change and cultural shift on that level? Well, if Kanye were here, he would say yes. He said it over and over again. Like, my goal is to inspire other people to create on this level. That's what I want to do. He wants to be a symbol, right, of possibility. One of the people I really like to compare him to is Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali said some really, really abrasive things in public, like really aggressive, like, I'm the greatest in the world, all of you bow before me, like I wrestled lightning, I threw thunder in jail, I'm the prettiest man in the world champ shouldn't be ugly like that guy, he should be pretty like me, like Muhammad Ali would say this stuff. One time this is one of my favorite stories about him, he got in the ring with this guy, this opponent, who had refused over and over again to call him Muhammad Ali in public. He kept calling him Cassius Clay, which is his birth name, but he chose the name Muhammad Ali. So he got this guy in the ring, and he just beat the shit out of him, like really beat him up. And he would stop every so often, and he would go, "What's my name? Say my name. Say it." And he would beat him up again. "Say my name." It's just like horrifying, aggressive, like hyper alpha behavior. It really, really reminds me of Kanye's behavior. But Muhammad Ali, you know, history tends to forget about like a lot of those sort of like minor interpersonal transgressions, and it remembers him as a symbol. This symbol for the African American community at the time, the symbol like of people who just like aren't going to sit down and shut up just because you tell them to sit down and shut up, right? And Kanye, at least for me and for a few other creative people I know, is a symbol on that level. One of my favorite Kanye stories, I went to his show at the Staples Center in LA, and I was on acid at the time, which is another whole other conversation. But he stopped. He was a great show, and it was you've seen some examples of that. This is from that show. That's the stage setup for that show. And he sort of stopped the songs in the middle of the, you know, pretty late into the set, and he walked out towards the front of the stage, and he started talking to the audience and going on one of his like characteristic rants about like the media and like how they distort everything, and how he really just wants to create dopeness, you know. And then he stopped talking and he walked back towards the back of the stage like he was going to start the songs again. And then in the middle of the catwalk, he turned around to this like massive like, you know, cathedral at the Staples Center with like hundreds of thousands of people in it, or however many, I don't know what the capacity is. But he looked at the audience and he said, "Y'all like it when I talk shit, yes or no?" And the entire audience, all those thousands of people were like, "Yes!" And that's really all you need to know about Kanye's career. Like, in a nutshell, like, "Y'all like it when I talk shit, yes or no?" Yes! Like those voices. Kim Gordon of Sonic Youth, who's one of my favorite bands from the early 90s, she once said, one of my favorite quotes ever, she said, "People go to a rock and roll show to see other people, see somebody else believe in themselves for an hour and a half." Right? And nobody, I mean, arguably nobody on this planet believes in themselves as much as Kanye West believes in himself. And that's what makes him, in his own words, during his BBC interview, the #1 rock star on the planet. Thank you. Do you have time for questions?